versus JPEG, you need to first imagine your image as a giant colorful shape, such as this. The more you touch this big beautiful shape, the smaller and duller it will become. It is important when editing your photos that you learn to be as non-destructive as possible. In this software by ColorThink, you can see a visual comparison of an original and a processed image. When editing your files, you want to end up with the largest shape possible. That shape is your image's information, the color range, the detail, size, and sharpness. Things to consider in shape size maximization are: how much can my eye actually see? How much can my camera see? How much can my Photoshop color management profile see? How will I be resaving the file when I'm done? And what mediums will my file be presented on? Is it going on my website? Is it going on a billboard? Or is it going up in a fine art gallery? ColorThink actually has profiles for most of what I've just mentioned. Before we open the two files, let's take a look at the metadata. Both images were shot just within seconds of each other, and both shot while on a tripod. Immediately we see that the RAW file is much larger. We have 23 megabytes on the RAW file and just 4 megabytes on the JPEG. And when processing correctly, that gap will widen even more. The JPEG is on the left and the RAW is on the right. Look at the London text and Lady Liberty's face especially. You will instantly notice the detail in our RAW image is much higher. The RAW file has a very fine grain structure, which is a great thing, especially when it comes to sharpness, and also when sending it off to the printers. Now look at the blacks. The JPEG is all blacked up, looking like one color when the RAW file has a nice gradient from the shadow of the cup. Let's do a color, shadow, blacks, and whites comparison. Let's start by looking at the numbers that we're getting in the shadows. In Photoshop's info palette here, we see RGB. If we go to the JPEG, we see in this shadow up here, we're getting 22 in the reds. Shifting over to the RAW, we're getting about 29 in the reds and a 23 in the greens. Going back to the JPEG, we're getting a 14 in the greens and an 8 in the blues. Going to the RAW, we're getting 20 in the blues. And as you probably know, 0 means it's totally blacked out and there's no information, and 255, which would be in the whites in your highlights, means it's totally white and there's no information. RAW holds a much better gamut, as we're about to see. Let's take a look at the whites here, and we're getting 227 in the reds, and over here we're getting 233. In the RAW we're getting 227 in the greens. In the JPEG we're getting 234. And in the blues on the JPEG we're getting 227. Shifting over to the RAW file, we're getting 225. So it's actually brighter, and it's actually a more contrasty image that the JPEG is, which takes away your ability to decide that for yourself. When you have a slightly flatter image, then you can decide if you want it more contrasty or less contrasty, and you can keep the detail. Now let's flash back and forth and see the difference in the color shift. JPEG, RAW, JPEG, RAW, JPEG, RAW. That's my visual comparison between RAW and JPEG. It's important to know the basic differences when trying to capture and produce the best images possible.